Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're watching this. I'm going to go over the safe space opening in case this standalone unit is used for policies and procedures. It's important to remember that there could be survivors in this room. If you need space, that's okay, step away. Speak with me during the break if you need to, I'm here for you. Reflect on how you're reacting to some of the things you hear or you see. Don't share the stories that you hear in this room outside of this room with others. There should be an agreement of confidentiality between us as we learn and grow from each other. Avoid judgments. Time does not cure all. If you need help, it's never too late to get help. Be kind to yourself. Thank you very much. Settle in, and we're going to get ready to talk about policies and procedures. My name is Ian Russell, and I'll be presenting Policies and Procedures on behalf of ICMEC.org. I'm going to ask you to pause in just a moment. I'd like you to take a piece of paper and write 3 things that help you make a decision in life. What drives you? How do you know what to do? How do you make a decision when something important comes along? When you're ready, just go ahead and resume play. All right, let's hear some of the ideas and thoughts. We all have guiding principles. And that's what helps us decide what to do and what not to do. Some come from high authorities, others come from the heart, some come from experience. But where do we go when we need guidance? Well, in the school setting, we need to go to policy. Policies address and mitigate risk. Professionalism is protective. Before we jump in and talk more about policies, I want to remind everyone, just briefly, the difference between a policy and procedure, and sometimes we use them intertwinedly. The reality is that a policy is a deliberate system of principles to guide decisions and achieve rational outcomes. A policy is a broad statement. It's an umbrella statement. Policies are general. They're adopted by the governance body with your organization. So perhaps your school board and superintendent are the ones that adopt and approve policies. A procedure is what we do to make sure that the policy is enacted. The procedures are the nuts and bolts. Procedure is designed to describe the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why by means of establishing a sense of accountability, a level of accountability for implementing policy. So having a policy on child protection is not enough. You have to have procedures that tell us the how and the what and the where and the why and how we are going to achieve our policy of having child protection and safeguarding in schools. Why do we need to have written and approved policies and procedures? Well, for one, there could be legal ramifications if you don't have these things in place. They will also offer you guidance when issues arise. They will also help to protect children. I guess that's the over obvious one. But they support the school's mission and vision as well. They serve as potentially a third point expert in the room. This is not me. The policy states I'm a mandated reporter. I have nothing against you. I'm a mandated reporter by policy. Of course, policies can also guide and help us accomplish accreditation standards. Policies around child protection can help us with our hiring. And obviously, they also endow upon us a level of credibility. You're most likely going to need to pause this next part of the video so you can take time to read through this case study. It's a case study on boundary crossing in international schools. As you read through this case study, ask yourself, is something off? What should be done? How would a teacher at this school know what to do? What might be a policy that would guide behavior, guide appropriate behavior? What kind of procedures should be in place to guide this policy? Reflect on a piece of paper and write down your thoughts. As the first paragraph highlights, sometimes good teachers are bad. So you have your child protection policy in place. It is our role and responsibility to protect children. Maybe you use the UN charter of student rights to help guide you in the creation of that policy. A procedure that would obviously need to take place here is the minute that one parent complained about the touchy manner, what was done? Did you immediately form the child protection group to evaluate, to look at the case, to study the case, to do an inquiry? Did you think about creating a procedure or regulations that dealt with the duty of care or the boundaries between parents and teachers or teachers and students? Did you consider that you are potentially creating, in this case anyway, excuse me, you're not creating anything, I know, but in this case, there is potential that this environment fostered an ethos that allowed for grooming. You can see how this case quickly leads us to the understanding that having policy to help avoid and help mitigate issues is equally as important as to having policies and procedures in place to follow up on the aftermath of the event. I'm sure you guys nailed this one and came up with a lot of ideas and things, and maybe even reflected on your own policies and procedures you have at your own site and see how they need to be fine-tuned. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. What should our policies include? Well, they should obviously first align with existing national and international laws on child protection. They should envelope a set of principles and beliefs about your duty of care for each and every individual in your school. There should be roles and responsibilities that are clearly articulated for the classroom teacher, for staff members, for anyone who enters the threshold of your building. There should be a code of conduct that's not just signed once in the hiring process, but something that's resurrected every single year to have a recommitment, a commitment to a ethos, code of conduct for your school. You should have procedures that help you with recruiting and the selection of staff members. You should also have procedures and policy that help you manage allegations. There should be multiple pathways for reporting allegations. There should be a team approach. Who's on that team? What is their role on that team for child protection? You should have embedded child protection training. And I'm not talking about the very first orientation of the school year, but take 15 minutes every month to engage in conversation, do case studies, do tabletop drills for child protection. Make sure you have a safe environment policy. Should doors be left open? Can the kids visit classrooms after school hours? What are our engagement on the playground? What does our safe environment look like? This chart can give you an overview of some of the things that are needed to be within your policies and procedures. Starting with the very top here with the national laws and the rights of the children from the UN, as well as duty of care and definitions should be your main policies. Of course, this then shows you about your supporting policies such as code of conducts or your acceptable use policies for computer and technology. More and more, we're going one-to-one, even down as far as low as third grade. What are our policies in regards to child protection and that one-to-one policy? What are our communication policies, supervision policies? Do you have a whistleblowing policy at your school? What about activities and travel? What does it look like when a group goes off and stays in the gym together or are in individual houses? What are your policies that protect our children and ensure that they can have a safe and wonderful time on those trips? What about peer-on-peer abuse? This seems to be one that's quite lacking in policies today. What about peer-on-peer abuse? Have you thought about that as a policy and procedure? Look at your environment. Of course, there's safer hiring, there's a child protection, there's background and identity checks, there's references, there's interview. Sometimes there's what they call a three deep reference check, and as well as you need to have procedures that talk about your expectations for boundaries, expectations for reporting and responsibility. You're the mandated reporter. You're the first person that must record what you saw. What does that actually mean? Can the nurse just do it? Can the counselor just do it? What is a first responder? How does that look like in a policy? What about staff? What about volunteers? What about teacher aides? What about paraprofessionals? What about parents that come through? How about contractors? How about contractors that come in to fix the air conditioning? What are you doing to ensure that children are safe and that you've got an environment that allows them to do their work in a safe manner, as well as the kids enjoy the safety of their school? Is there a crisis committee? How do you actually go about policy making? How do you do policy making for child protection? How do you do, or how might your response team look like? What about multiple roles within that? What kind of training do you do? Do you do ICMEC training? Is that it? Is that enough? Do you do ICMEC and then plus some more, and then do some train the trainers? Do you train everyone on staff? Do you train just the school nurses? What is your policy for professional development around child protection? Do you do those case reviews? Do you do safety planning? Do you have the opportunity to give feedback and to make recommendations to improve your process for child protection? Anyway, this chart's got a lot on it and a lot of guidance to help you ensure that you have the most comprehensive plan that you can have. Here are some things to think about as you're trying to mitigate risk for your school in the development of policies and procedures. Do you cover employee misconduct? Do you have a definition for sexual misconduct? How likely is this kind of abuse to occur? What would be the harm to the victim? What might be the harm to the community? And what might be the harm to the institution? Here's one excellent example of a code of conduct. What I like about this one in particular, the language is such that it's super clear. Appropriate, inappropriate. Appropriate and inappropriate, covering two areas. One, verbal, written, and online communications, and the second one, physical conduct. I could see something like this hanging in the staff lounge or blown up in a large poster-like thing. This resource can be found on the ICMEC website. We're going to go into that in a little bit later, but when you receive this PowerPoint, there is a hot link on the right-hand side here at the very bottom for you to click on, and it'll take you right to this exact resource. Code of conducts can be excellent ways to engage your staff in conversations at the beginning of every year. This easy chart can be found on the ICMEC website, and follow the link at the bottom of the page here when you receive the PowerPoint. Getting started. Don't be overwhelmed. If you've got nothing in place, you can follow this easy plan. But remember, the idea is not to have all this thing done tomorrow. You've got to go through some phases because it's going to take some work to do. One of the things I'll talk about later is don't cut and paste, and I'll explain that later. But phase one, you want to take a look at what are the accreditation requirements. You can go to ICMEC, the website, educational portal, and get ideas for policies and accreditations. You want to take a look and revise your hiring and procedures. There's a whole section on that, on hiring as well, coming up in one of the other webinars. You can train your protection designate. Who's in charge? Who's going to be the point person for this? You can train them through ICMEC. They can send them out to other organizations, but make sure that the person that you put in charge is not someone that has 2 extra free periods in their schedule, but someone that truly is committed to this and can get the training to do it right and to help you, because that training could alleviate incredible problems down the road. You don't want one crisis to create another crisis. Making sure you've got a committee to go over this and to talk about the codes of conducts, and multidisciplinary team for child protection studies and the student response for abuse, and do you have a prevention curriculum in place already? What can you be doing? Can the counselors be teaching a class? Should you use a program like Second Step, where every classroom teacher is responsible for doing their part? How are you going to inform and get your kids to be aware of child protection? A lot of times this is the missing element of schools, where they may have great policies and procedures and teachers may not know, but they rarely use the student's voice and give the students agency and have a say in their safety and their rights. Going on into phase 2, you'll talk about some training topics. You'll talk about grooming and what offender behavior looks like. You'll go over features of the peer-to-peer abuse. You'll look at barriers to reporting. Why are people afraid to report? Why don't they report? And what can we do to mitigate that fear and that worry so that we can get all allegations on the table and out, so we can inquire about them and see if we can come to resolution. What is the role of the first responder? This is something that I often come into play. Is it my responsibility to do something as a first responder, or is it the counselor's or the school nurse's responsibility or the principal's responsibility? Create a trauma-informed organization. Understand what trauma looks like. If you understand what it looks like, it's going to make you a much more caring organization and institution, and it's going to allow you to better meet the needs of your students. Go over how you handle incidences. Practice it. You practice for fire drill. You practice for earthquake drill, stay in place drill, stranger danger types of drills, or intruder alert, or active shooter in some cases. But how often do we train and do we do drills for child protection with your staff? Reach out to your local neighborhood. Is there a hospital that's doing some work in this area? Is there a psychologist in the area that is very active and engaged in child protection? Let them help you. Let them be advocates for you. And it's important to make those connections in the community. And then finally, through phase 3, is you're looking at your curriculum with a critical eye, and you're publicizing to the media. You're going public. You've got all this behind the doors work with policy development. Now all of a sudden you're going to go outside your campus and you're going to put up a big sign that says, by entering this threshold, you subscribe to child protection, and we are holding you accountable to child protection. So you've got that big sign. You're going public. There's no turning back at that point. You're telling it. You're making your commitment. You're making a commitment to being an advocate for children's rights. Take a critical eye now. Look at your policies that you've created. Do we have everything? Are we covered? Are we missing anything? Do we need to edit and make some changes? Also include annual training, ongoing training for staff development in child protection. Make sure you visit that code of conduct and boundary violations on a regular basis. How are you documenting any incidences? Make sure you have all those things in place. Here's another excellent resource, Tools for Writing Policies. It's a process, starting off with a research stage, where you're looking on the ICMIC portal, you're looking at your partner schools, you're looking around the world, you're trying to develop foundational beliefs and the rights of the children in your school. Then you may be into a developmental stage where you're identifying the key elements, you're drafting policy and identifying procedures, and then you go into a consultant stage. You seek input, you survey, you do focus groups on child protection, what that looks like at your school. And then you go into the final phase of implementation and revision, training, publicizing, addressing the gaps. This resource is found on the ICMIC website. Again, on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll be able to click on this and go right to the website to get this as a resource. I know you've thought about a lot of different policies, and here are some supplemental policies that you might also need to think about that perhaps might not have been on the forefront of your thinking on the development of policies. What policies do you have for your field trips and your travel? Is it completely separate, or is it all based in one? Do you have Week Without Walls, or out-of-country trips, or in-country trips, in which do you have policies that support yourself for child protection in that area? What is your communication policy and procedures? You don't just need a generic communication policy. You need specifics. How do you communicate before the incident? How do you communicate in the middle of the incident? And then how do you communicate after the incident? What is your policy on social media use? What is your policy on peer-to-peer? As I shared earlier, peer-to-peer abuse seems to be one of the areas in which a lot of procedures and policies are not written yet on. What is your photography policy? Are you allowed to go on a trip out of kingdom, take a bunch of pictures, and email those of kids? When you come back from a trip, how long should those photos be on a teacher's phone? What are the parent responsibilities in terms of child protection? What about changing rooms? What does it look like, child protection look like in changing rooms? What are the boundaries of a coach going into the changing room? If you're running a pre-K or a kindergarten or early childhood center, what are your intimate care policies? How do you change diapers? How do you apply a rash cream that a parent has asked you to apply for their child during daycare times? These are some of the other things that we may not think of at first, but certainly will come with time and should be developed for each one of your sites. There's a resource link on the right-hand side here for ICMEC. Oops, you're not looking at the slide. But when you get the slides, there is a hot link on the right-hand side. It'll take you right to supplemental policies. And again, don't worry. At the end of the session, we're going to go right on the ICMEC site, and I'm going to show you exactly where to look. That's going to make your day terrific. Now that you've got a pretty good idea about policies and procedures, now reflect back on that case we talked about earlier. What were the professional boundaries that were violated? The verbal, the physical, the emotional, the social distances that the educator must maintain in order to ensure structure and security and predictability in an educational environment. Who's responsible for maintaining appropriate boundaries? As in the case we had earlier, crossing boundaries can easily be a sign of grooming. Grooming is the intentional manipulation to build trust, to gain access, to initiate abuse, to maintain abuse. It's strategic in its nature. It's well thought out and well planned by the perpetrator. These actions help to hide abuse, to prevent discovery, to be underground. In the case that we did earlier, who was groomed? Was it an institution that promoted grooming unintentionally? Stop and think about that for just a moment. Institutional grooming is a term that involves perpetrators using features unique to the organizational setting to groom or abuse a child. The organizational setting includes both the school's physical environment and the school's organizational culture. A school culture that facilitates grooming behaviors and abuse will often be one where there's a lack of knowledge by staff members of grooming techniques and a lack of understanding of what grooming is. There might be inadequate or inconsistent supervision of children. There might be an unwillingness to intervene in potential or inappropriate behaviors. There also might be an absence of clear and formal rules, expectations, and behaviors, or a misapplication of the rules, and staff and student relationships and boundaries are non-existent. There might be incredible trust between the school leadership and the perpetrator. There also might be a lack of ways to report concerns about inappropriate behavior, a lack of communication about reporting channels. Grooming is preventable. The key is implementing policies and procedures that reduce the opportunity for grooming behaviors and the likelihood that grooming will lead to abuse and the increased likelihood of detection and reporting. An institution can be inviting for a predator, one that has a normalization of rule breaking, one that inhibits reporting or has reduced accountability, has zero accountability. Maybe one that allows teachers incredible access to students, unfiltered or unmonitored. Perhaps an environment that prevents disclosure, or even one that has incredible increased bias. And that by that we mean that there's no way this can happen at our esteemed institution. There's no way that teacher could possibly. There's no way that would happen. We have a bias towards looking the other way, perhaps. If your school is in a position where all of these things here are true, you might be ripe for inviting in a predator. This is all really scary stuff, but it all starts with a conversation. The more you can talk about it, if you can take this conversation back to your schools, starts with policy, starting with that conversation about policy and the need for developing policy. That conversation alone will begin to change the possible culture of your school. We've talked a lot about the need for development of policies and procedures. Maybe you're scared straight, and that's okay. We have you covered here, and if you really getting serious, we have audits and checklists that are on the ICMEC website. They can help guide you through point by point what you need to have in place, policies and procedures that will guide you in the horrific event that you need them. All right, so you have what it takes to create an ethos of protection. You're going to be looking at safer hiring. You're going to be developing a handbook that's going to help guide the teachers and the students and the parents. You're going to be looking at maybe some potential parent workshops and student education, perhaps implementing a program for child protection. You're going to be developing a code of conduct. You're going to have a way of documenting and reporting and a way to centrally record those documents in a safe environment. You're going to have a child protection committee. You're going to have someone that's going to lead that committee, a designated lead, as they would say in England. You're also going to be able to take your employees and all the adults working with you, and you're going to train them, including your janitors, including anyone that comes across and works with children or is in your building on a daily basis. You're going to develop this duty of care. You're going to take a look at the national laws and perhaps the international laws if your national laws are lacking. You're going to develop relationships in your community. You're going to be living these policies and procedures. And what I mean by that is not just creating the policy and using it for accreditation or for whatever you use it for and putting it on the shelf. You're going to be talking about these things on a regular basis. You're going to be making sure that people understand what the multiple paths for reporting child protection issues and concerns are. There you go. How hard can that be? Remember, every journey starts with one step, and I want to take you one step closer by looking at the ICMEC website. The ICMEC website is a little intimidating. Not that it's bad or really scary, but there's so much information on there for many different areas of child protection. So let's get started. If you look at the screen in front of you, you see that there's the very first page. You're going to go to icmec.org. Once you click on the educational portal, you'll be taken to a place where it says policies and procedures. And you can see there are 4 beautiful squares. The first one is child protection. The second one is school policies. The third one is international and national laws. And the fourth one is audits and checklists. School policy is where you want to start. International and national law will help inform you. Literally, there are countries from all around the world with their child protection laws right here. And I know that it's updated all the time by ICMEC. And then, of course, we talked about the audits and checklists. That last one is right there for you and your convenience. You can click on that and you can explore. Here's a little nugget for you. As you're going through the expansive website of ICMEC, if you see a long list of resources and you just don't know where to begin, scroll down and see if you can find one of the resources or 2 of the resources in green. If it's in green, that means it's probably a great place to start. After all, green is go. In a nutshell, your CP program should include prevention and response. It should have multiple policies, including safer hiring. It should have reporting and response procedures clearly in place. You should have a code of conduct that's signed every year where teachers can recommit to their duty to protect and care for the children under their care. There should be student abuse and prevention education in place. And there should be a clear program for induction of staff, induction of parents, new parents training, teacher assistants, and your janitorial staff. This whole process of getting ready for child protection and safeguarding must seem extremely daunting. Well, to be fair, it is daunting, but you can do this one step at a time. Just by being here today is a change of culture in your school potentially. You go back and talk about what you've learned today, look at your policies and look at your procedures and see where it is you are and see where you need to go. Identify those gaps. Remember, no one size fits all. Your school will have a unique program that's specifically related to the needs of your students and families. You need to adjust for context. You need to make sure that you have effective programs and make sure that your board and your administration is committed to funding programs, making sure that your people have the right training, making sure that your safeguarding designee or child protection lead has the training they need. Don't just fill those spots with a person because they have an extra free period. It's a never-ending process, and that's the unfortunate thing. Schools are a natural place for predators to go to. It's where victims are. So you can never let your guard down. This will be a never-ending cycle or process where once you think you've got it done, start over, review your policies, make sure they're still intact, make sure people are following the policies and procedures. And this is very important. There's an awful lot of temptation to just cut and paste from some other organization. Maybe you look at the school next door or the school across the ocean, and you say, they've got a pretty good program. Let's just cut and copy it. When you cut and paste things like that, you rob yourself of the opportunity to have deep-seated and hard conversations about your school and where you are. Also, it allows you an opportunity to bring other people to the table as you create and develop a just right fit for your school. And that alone can change the culture, engaging in conversations, developing clear policies and procedures. I wish you the best of luck on your journey. And we are available at ICMEC if you want to follow up for any conversations and questions you might have. Again, don't be intimidated by the website. Get started, get in there, look for the green, and you're off on your way on this journey. Thanks for participating in this policy and procedure talk on child protection. I wish you the best of luck in your journey.